everybody. We welcome you all for the day 2 of our continuous CME. For the first session, I'll be calling upon Dr. Periyandavar, Dr. Nalla Perumal, and Dr. E. Suresh to chair this session. Sir, please.
Good morning, everyone. Today's session starts with a very important topic, legacy of metformin by Dr. J.C. Shekhar. And we all know that metformin forms the background therapy whenever a patient with type 2 diabetes gets diagnosed. And it's a base drug. Unless it is contraindicated, we start with metformin. It is cost effective. And it has got varied actions. And even in pregnancy, in some situations we use. So to talk about this, I invite Dr. J.C. Shekhar.
Good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here with you this morning and tell you the first talk of today's session, the legacy of metformin. At the outset, my hearty congrats to Dr. Shanmugam sir and his team, and the scientific people, chairman committee of this conference for making such a wonderful conference full of useful topics which you can put into practice the very next day. I'm happy to be a part of the team. I welcome all of you for the morning. It's quite right that today's topic starts with metformin. This is a golden standard in diabetes care. And now we are celebrating 60 plus years of innovation and impact. Metformin was put into clinical use in the year 1957. In the war again, even in playing cricket, you spend just like opening batsman in the war against diabetes. Usually you send metformin as the first batsman, as opening batsman. Today, athletes, it's been so. So, there are no conflicts of interest in this presentation, and the audience permitted to take photograph of this presentation. My topic is legacy. You know what's legacy? Legacy usual meaning is the property or the way on which you impart your heirs or your sons and issues. But there's a deeper meaning also. You stand tall amongst controversies. You come up in life, just stand tall and motivate others also for that. Undergo all the hardships and win the war over it and leave a legacy. That's what it's. Metformin has done the same thing. Our Kavindra Kannadasan, the great poet, has defined legacy in just two important words.
மாபெரும் சபைகளில் நீ நடந்தால் உனக்கு மாலைகள் விழ வேண்டும் ஒரு மாற்று குறையாத மன்னவன் இவன் என்று போற்றி புகழ வேண்டும் மாபெரும் சபைகளில் நீ நடந்தால் உனக்கு மாலைகள் விழ வேண்டும் ஒரு மாற்று குறையாத மன்னவன் இவன் என்று போற்றி புகழ வேண்டும்.
And that's legacy for you. Being discovered in the year 1957, it stands tall among the anti-diabetic oral drugs because of it's the first line of treatment. It's used for over 100 million people worldwide, and its time-tested efficacy and safety it has got. But it's come up the hard way. It's derived from the French lilac, derived from Galaga officinalis. It was used for malaria and flu previously. And Dr. Gene Stern stumbled upon its anti-glycemic properties accidentally when he treated his malaria and flu. He studied in detail for 4 years and introduced the molecule in 1957. But you are as good as your friends, and metformin came to the market with other biguanides, fenformin and bisformin. Because of the side effect of the other two molecules, this was thrown to the dustbin for some time. But people in Europe and India realized that it's a good molecule, and between 1965 and 1977, metformin was combined with sulfonylureas as it had synergistic properties in lowering blood sugar. It was ruling the roost for almost 3 or 4 decades, people would have known. And approved, it got entry into the America by FDA only in 1995, after so many trials, and once it entered, by 1997, it was the top position. All the guidelines recommended metformin to be the first line of management, first line of drug, because it was so good, you just can't say no to it. Its mechanism of action is so interesting. It acts both by insulin signaling and insulin-dependent and insulin-non-dependent pathways, independent pathways. It stimulates AMPK. AMPK is 5-AMP activated protein kinase. It inhibits the lipogenic enzymes. It activates GLUT4. It decreases the lipogenesis, increases fatty acid oxidation, increases the basal glucose uptake. This one arm. And through the insulin pathway, it activates insulin signaling, increases the insulin-dependent glucose uptake, and thereby decreases the insulin resistance. It's primarily known as an insulin-resistant drug. So the mechanism of action, by this mode of action, it suppresses the hepatic and renal glucogenesis. It inhibits the AMP activated protein. Here AMP is CAMP, cyclic AMP, not the AMPK. And thereby it decreases the uptake and utilization of the glucose by skeletal muscles. It reduces the insulin resistance, inhibits the elementary absorption of glucose, promotes insulin binding to the receptors. It has so many wide range of effects as an anti-diabetic drug. It involves at least 5 systems of the body. In the liver, it decreases the gluconeogenesis, inhibits the gene transcription, decreases enzyme activity, decreases gluconeogenesis and substrates. It inhibits the mitochondrial respiratory chain, inhibits the hepatic lipogenesis, fatty acid oxidation is increased. Thus, it protects the liver. It's hepatoprotective due to these effects. And in the adipose tissue, which is the main site of action, it increases the glucose uptake, it increases the fatty oxidation, decreases adipogenesis, and most importantly, the brown fat adipose tissue thrombogenesis by activation of the brown adipose tissues. And skeletal muscles, another important site of action of the metformin, it decreases the glucose uptake, increases fatty acid oxidation, decreases muscle inflammation. And GI tract, you're surprised to know, it decreases the glucose absorption. It increases the glucose transport from the blood vessel to the gut lumen. The glucose utilization by intestinal cells is increased, and it increases GLP-1 secretion. It's a legend, it motivates others, as I told you. It increases the GLP-1 secretion, which is also an effective anti-diabetic drug, and it modulates the gut microbiota. The data has come off date. It's an interesting thing. And it has a hand to play in the immune system also. Inhibits the NF-kappa beta pathway, decreases inflammatory cytokines, decreases the neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio, inhibits the monocyte differentiation of macrophages. That it strikes the root cause of diabetes. Due to these effects, or the player effects of this, endless, it decreases hyperglycemia, decreases hyperinsulinemia, decreases LDL, increases HDL, decreases the free fatty acids, increases the GLP-1 enzyme secretion, as I all told you, decreases the inflammatory markers, increases the antithrombotic activity, decreases oxidative stress, and increases the gut microflora biodiversity. Due to all the pediatric effects, it's beneficial clinical response not only in diabetes and pre-diabetes, but it offers severe protection, slightly decreases the BMI, decreases the BP, gives good neuroprotection, nephroprotection, and of its protection from cancer of late. These findings come up fast in the last decade. And aging, it retards aging. I'll be talking about it later. And PCOS is a well-established indication. And in COVID-19 era, you have seen that in COVID-19 patients who are on metformin, they had less stormy course of COVID-19 when compared to others. All these things are so beneficial effects of metformin. Side effects of metformin are always there. Any drug has side effect, but they are so minimal. The most common side effect is loose stools and diarrhea, stomach cramps, gas and bloating, nausea, and beta deficiency. How to avoid these? Loose stools can be avoided by giving extended power machines. This is available throughout the world. It's available, except in GH. You can take it along with food to avoid stomach cramps. You can start with the low dosage and go slow to avoid gas bloating. You can try over-the-counter solutions for nausea, and beta deficiency is one important thing which you should be aware of, because metformin depletes the beta stores, especially it's more people who are 60 plus age, people who are pure vegetarians who got kidney failure, they're more prone to develop beta deficiency. So it's not a bad idea to give them shots of beta frequently. And the much hyped about lactic acidosis, which was so prevalent previously, has gone now. It's very uncommon, but it does occur. Patients who receive a high dose of metformin, persons who are given, who are in the late stage of kidney failure and hepatic failure, they can develop lactic acidosis. So you should be very cautious about that. Glycemic efficacy of metformin is unquestionable. Glycemic efficacy when compared to other drugs, oral drugs, you can see by when metformin decreases, it means as much as 1 to 2%. It's top ranked against all these things. Sometimes are equally they follow close, but a lot of side effects you can see. Thiazolidinones again 0.5 to 1.4 only, and SGLT inhibitors 1, and DPP-4 is only 0.8. As I already told you, to establish a legacy should boost up your compatriots, and that's what metformin does here. This study shows that metformin can be combined effectively. The good effect of it can with sulfonylureas, thiazolidinones, and this combination of metformin, thiazolidinone, and sulfonylurea can reduce the HbA1c as much as 2.5%. And this holds good for the recent antiviral drugs like DPP-4 inhibitors and SGLT inhibitors also. Combined together, they work marvelously well. A lot of trials have talked so much about metformin, the Eucalyptus trial. In fact, the legacy effect, which is established, still going strong till now today of the Eucalyptus, it's the legacy of metformin only. D4 trials and Accord trial in 2010, Saver-Timi trial, JAMA 2012, which studied metformin cancer risk, and Diabetes Care 2014, metformin and all-cause mortality. All these trials proved beyond doubt that it has its own legacy. It was well showcased in this cartoon, which occurred in the Diabetology in 2017 in the ESD journal. It shows very clearly 60 years of metformin use, a glance at the past and look at the future. See how it involves almost all the things: PCOS, cancer, the aging, inflammation, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, microbiota, type 1 diabetes being tried now, diabetes prevention, pregnancy, and historical ovary. All these things are plus effects of legacy of metformin. And PCOS is well established. Everybody uses it, even general practitioners, all quacks use it, gynecologists use it, such a beautiful molecule for PCOS. It improves insulin sensitivity, reduces glucose levels, helps with weight loss, balances the testosterone levels, and improves fertility. At the same time, you should be aware of that can produce some side effect also, depletes the body nutrients, as already discussed with you, disrupts the endocrine system, alters the gut microbiome, GI problems can result, and risk of developing lactic acidosis. Same time, the latest craze is this one. The beautiful article is about 2013. The Pello's journal, it shows the metformin, compared metformin, glucosamine, and insulin for treatment of gestational diabetes mellitus. It's a network meta-analysis which comprised of 6,000 plus women on pharmacotherapy. Head-on, metformin has an edge over insulin. The metabolic outcomes, metformin reduces weight gain, reduces hypoglycemia, and reduces neonatal hypoglycemia. Fetal outcomes is less likely to have low gestational age babies, similar mean birth weight, neonatal death, stillbirths, and NICU admissions. And pregnancy outcomes, it potentially reduces pregnancy-induced hypertension and preeclampsia. Such beneficial molecule, glibenclamide, pales into significance when compared to this. So the study concluded that compared to insulin, metformin is associated with more favorable outcomes for the treatment of GDM. So these are the beautiful legacy of the molecule of metformin. So metformin, this is the latest trial which are going now, attenuating the hallmark of aging. A lot of plus seconds coming out, a lot of study, improving nutrient sensing, enhanced autophagy. We recently talked about enhancing intracellular communications, protecting against macromolecular damage, delaying stem cell aging, modulating mitochondrial function, regulating gene transcription, lowering telomere attrition, and reduces senescence. All these things. In fact, you can recall a journal, this article occurred in Nature some 10 days back. The brain aged more slowly in monkeys given a cheap diabetic drug. It shows that monkeys that received metformin daily showed slower age-associated brain decay than those who did not receive the drug. It reduced the age by 6 to 8 years compared to 10 to 18 years of human years. Those of here who are using metformin, they should be happy because their age is being reduced by giving metformin. So, it's the legacy of metformin not only in the diabetic treatment part of it, but worldwide in the financial, economical, countrywide. It's accessible, affordable, wide availability, reduced healthcare cost. The real legacy, it saved so many bucks in the world. It transformed diabetes care. It improves lives worldwide, continuing innovation and discovery.
உள்ளம் சொன்னதை மறைத்தவன் இல்லை, ஊருக்கு தீமை செய்தவன் இல்லை. உள்ளம் சொன்னதை மறைத்தவன் இல்லை, ஊருக்கு தீமை செய்தவன் இல்லை. வல்லவன்.
And that's metformin for you.
உள்ளம் சொன்னதை மறைத்தவன் இல்லை, ஊருக்கு தீமை செய்த செய்தவன் இல்லை உள்ளம் சொன்னதை மறைத்தவன் இல்லை ஊருக்கு தீமை செய்தவன் இல்லை வல்லவன் ஆயினும் நல்லவன் வல்லவன் ஆயினும் நல்லவன்.
There's metformin for you. Thank you. This is the temple tower of Sringeri temple. You always with legacies don't change, they grow richer. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your excellent lecture on this A to Z of metformin and confirming about the legacy of metformin. I think questions we will take in the end. So next I call upon the next speaker, Dr. Selvaraj sir, to deliver lecture on century of insulin, tips and tricks. Dr. Selvaraj is, he doesn't require any introduction. He is a king of Tuticorin and he is a physician at Tuticorin, and he was organizing secretary of past track 2023 at Tuticorin. Coming to the topic, insulin. So insulin is a God's gift to mankind because before the invention of insulin, the diabetes, particularly type 1 diabetes, was considered to be a death sentence for people. So from the year insulin was introduced, it dramatically changed the life of all the type 1 diabetic patients. And now Dr. Selvaraj will highlight about the century of insulin. Over to Dr. Selvaraj.
Thank you, Dr. Periandavar. I am extremely thankful to Dr. Shanmugam and his team for the excellent arrangements and opportunity given to me. I know how difficult to arrange a conference like conducting a marriage. So today afternoon I think Shanmugam will be relieved of all the tensions. Thank you once again. My topic is century of insulin, tips and tricks, and everybody sitting is well versed about insulin. You know much more than what I know. Anyhow, for the sake of completion, I will go through the slides. There are two journeys in insulin. First, the discovery in 1921 by Charles Best and Frederick Banting, and production of insulin commercially by Novo Nordisk at 1923 in Scandinavia. Since the journey continued with each advancement developing, overcoming the limitations of earlier insulin treatment. The 1980 human insulin was discovered with a scalability that it is highly purified and can be produced unlimited supply. 2000 analog insulin discovered with a flexibility, predictable action profile provides more flexibility than human insulin and reduced weight gain, not always, especially people with obesity. And 2010 new generation of insulin, the low risk of hypoglycemia when used carefully, especially ultra long acting insulin release very slowly and reducing the risk of hypoglycemia. It convenience of use, especially in ultra fast acting insulin. You need not take half an hour before food. It can taken along with food or while eating. And simplicity of ultra long acting profile means fewer insulin injection. You know, anybody if you advise them insulin, they are afraid of the regimen, especially when you ask them to take a bolus insulin for 3 times, they will run away, they will change the doctor. So again, a continued innovation to ensure better treatment outcome for person with diabetes mellitus. 1922 insulin was discovered. 1977 there was a discovery on recombinant insulin, and rapid acting analogs discovered in 1980, and 2000 basal analogs like Fiasp, and once weekly insulin like Trulicity was discovered then, which had physiologically distributed weight and hypo benefit. Again the glucose sensitive insulins with hypo benefit, and the future is the beta cell replacement, all we are looking for. So the state of the nation, according to ICMR 2021, the prevalence of diabetes in India stands at 11.4%, and 53.3 people have pre-diabetes. In 2021, there are 101 million diabetics in India. What is more is pathetic is pre-diabetes, 136. And WHO said that more than 50% of people are unaware they are suffering from diabetes, and which leads to health complications if not detected and treated earlier. Again, burden of diabetes in India, we have got our population has got 2% higher average of HbA1c connected with ADA, and 101 million people with diabetes, 16% have got only controlled on therapy, all because of due to relatively earlier type 2 diabetes onset, higher insulin resistance, and greater insulin secretory defect. In a subject who eats 3 times a day, 50% of the day is spent in postprandial phase. So treatment strategies should address both meal-related and fasting hyperglycemia for optimal HbA1c control. Patients do not have good glycemic control despite being on multiple OADs. The use of multiple OAD driven by convenience, because when you take oral anti-diabetic, there is you don't bother about time and the crowd and the place where you are taking, and acceptance by patient and limited consultation time by doctor, that is more important. And a successive OAD is providing lessening effect. If we take single 2 OADs, there is only 1% reduction in HbA1c. If I add third OAD, it is less than 0.5 again. If I add 4 OADs, it is 0.2% only, additional OAD. But if you add insulin, the HbA1c reduction is more, that is 1.3. So substantial benefit from initiating insulin. Adherence to lifestyle modification is poor. So Diacar India 2001 using 6,168 type 2 diabetic patients, only 54.6% patients are compliant to dietary advice, and only 37.2% follow advice to exercise, what Dr. Rajendran was telling yesterday. What is the need of insulin therapy? You all know early insulin therapy reduces the risk of complications. UKPD's prospective observation study in 23 hospital-based clinics in England studying 4,585 patients. Every 1% reduction in HbA1c leads to 14% reduction in heart attack, 12% reduction in stroke, microvascular disease reduced by 37%, lower limb amputation or fatal peripheral vascular disease 43%. The benefits of insulin occur apart from reduction of blood sugar. There is a pleiotropic benefits like cardioprotective, neuroprotective, anti-apoptotic, vasodilatation and platelet inhibition, beta cell rest and improvement in function, and antithrombotic, antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. RSSD clinical practice recommendation 2022, avoid using insulin as a threat, but alleviate patients' anxiety about insulin. Insulin therapy should be considered in all patients failing to achieve glycemic targets when the patient is on 3 oral drugs. There are barriers for using insulin. First is the patient-related barrier like hypoglycemia, needle phobia, fear of weight gain, and the cost of insulin, burdensome regimens, and again the illiteracy about the insulin. Again, physician-related barrier, that is compassion fatigue towards the patient, and again burdensome regimens, and lack of time per patient. When you want to put the patient first time on insulin, you have to spend minimum 15 minutes. You talk to the patient, you convince, and ask the patient to take the first dose of insulin in front of you, and ask them to demonstrate how to take insulin. Don't depend on your nuts. They will most of the time don't do properly. And the adverse effects of insulin should be explained to the patient. And fear of doctor shopping is also always there. So in Indian reality, both the patient barrier and a physician barrier with patients with diabetes. How to initiate insulin? So if you take conversation, diabetes is a progressive disorder and insulin is the option we may have to consider in the future. You must tell all type 2 patients initially. When the body reaches the insulin decline state, insulin has to be supplemented to ensure a good long-term glycemic control and prevent complication. Make them to understand you have to avoid complications. Starting on insulin does not mean you have not managed your sugars well. It is the natural course of the diabetes. So, disease process should be explained to the patient. What is the choice of insulin at initiation? The ground realities in India impact survey, majority of respondents of healthcare providers preferred insulin regimen that can offer efficacy, safety and convenience and initiation and while continuing therapy. So the need for good PPG control right from the start, both fasting, postprandial blood glucose and HbA1c. Indices for holistic choice of insulin contains the lower hyperglycemia, mealtime flexible and less weight gain and a simple regimen and again the cost of the therapy. What is the role of insulin? The type of insulin, insulin regimen, insulin delivery system and storage of solution. Types of insulin you all know, animal insulin, human insulin and a modern insulin analog. Animal insulin discovered 92 contains short-acting, intermediate and a mixture of short and intermediate, that is biphasic insulin. And a human insulin 1982, after 60 years only after the animal insulin discovered, human insulin came to the market. Short-acting, intermediate-acting and a mixture of short and intermediate-acting, again biphasic. Modern insulin analog, rapid-acting, long-acting, that is basal insulin and mixture of rapid intermediate-acting, biphasic. Human insulin contains short-acting, were absorbed quickly and lasts for several hours. It's available as active human insulin. And intermediate-acting, more slowly absorbed, lasts for 24 hours. And insulatard available as Insular and Humulin. And premixed insulin, mixture of short and long-acting insulin. Short-acting human insulin, soluble, it is clear solution, acts onset of action 30 minutes, peak 1 to 3 hours, duration action up to 8 hours. Whereas intermediate long-acting human insulin, crystal in suspension, it is cloudy, you need to reassessment prior to injection. NPH or isofen, onset 1.5 hours, peak 4 to 12 hours, duration of action up to 24 hours. So modern insulin analog and a modern insulin analog formed by modifying human insulin molecules, that is like human insulin. Modern insulin also produced by recombinant DNA, that is insulin lispro, insulin aspart and insulin glulysin. All are made by modification of amino acid. And the modern insulin analogs, rapid acting, absorb very rapidly, last only for few hours, aim to control postprandial glucose. Available as a novorapid and homolog, it's called aspart, lispro and glulysin. And long-acting insulin more slowly absorbed, designed to provide a low level of insulin throughout the day and night. So available as a Livamed, Detimir and a Lantus, glargine insulin. And a premixed again, mixture of rapid and intermediate actings available as Novomed, Humulax mix. Insulin regimens, there are different needs, the different insulin should be used. And a commonly used insulin regimen is once daily or twice daily intermediate or once daily, twice, thrice daily premixed. Basal bolus therapy, more of a physiological. And a continuous subcutaneous insulin infusion by pump, it is very costly. And a mealtime rapid acting insulin. Once daily basal insulin, exact duration depends on the insulin and the time applied. Modern analog insulin and NPH insulin provide 24 hours. But the duration of action of intermediate human insulin prepares applied dose is too short, not exactly 24 hours. Benefits of once daily basal insulin, require only one injection, convenient for the patient, may help to over the resistance starting insulin injection. Useful to patient who require someone else, that is need help of others, may be associated with fewer hypoglycemic episodes because of fewer injection. Shortcomings of basal insulin, insulin hepatic, it inhibits hepatic glucose production, lower fasting blood glucose, but does not target the postprandial glucose. So premixed insulin containing rapid and intermediate acting, cloudy, need resuspension, several different combinations available, 25-70, 30-70, and onset 10 to 20 minutes, peak 1 to 4 hours, duration up to 24 hours. Again, premixed model insulin, combination of short and intermediate acting modern insulin, cloudy, need resuspension, onset 10 to 20 minutes, peak 1 to 4 hours, up to 24 hours. Premixed insulin, once, twice, or thrice you can use along with breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Benefits of premixed insulin, target mealtime glucose insulin, but you cannot change the insulin available, and limitation of premixed insulin may not cover lunchtime glucose excess, and a little dietary flexibility does not allow for incremental adjustment of individual insulin. Basal bolus regime, it always mimics the physiological insulin secretion. It can be given, the bolus insulin can be given before breakfast, lunch, dinner and bedtime, and the basal insulin covers 24-hour time. And benefits of basal bolus insulin, regime produces insulin profile that is closer to natural insulin production. The choice for type 1 diabetes, suited to those patients with type 2 diabetes who are highly motivated. They must prepare to take insulin. And limitation of basal bolus, multiple insulin injection require lot of work. Patient may reluctant to undertake so many injections. Risk of hypoglycemia may be greater than with other regimens. And a bolus insulin along with each meal. In addition, there is a bedtime insulin, gives better control. And a rapid acting modern insulin, soluble clear solution, onset 10 to 20 minutes, 1 to 3 hours, duration of action 5 to 5 hours. And a rapid acting modern insulin where it's used in the insulin pump, especially during the COVID period where people were exposed to high doses of steroid. They were controlled only with the insulin pump and this type of insulin. That is IDAC aspart, world only co-formulation insulin, a soluble combination of two insulin analog, that is ultra long acting degludec and short acting aspart in 70-30%, administered with the largest meal of the day. Administered IDAC BAD with the two most carbohydrate heavy meals are taken. There is suggested once weekly titration schedule for IDAC aspart 2 that is dose adjustment based on the lowest of the 3 preceding fast plasma glucose, and the fasting plasma target should be individualized. If your fasting target is above target, you can increase 2 units. If it is below, then you have to minus 2 units. The insulin delivery systems are available as insulin injection device, including the pens, that is a durable pen and a disposable pen where you cannot change the cartridges, and again insulin pump and insulin vials and syringes. Injection and pens, improved dose accuracy, convenient. Patient when going to travel or going for somewhere by flight abroad, you can very easily take along with you. And insulin injection pens, disadvantage, cannot mix in a free mixing regimen. Insulin pumps are very costly, and changeable needles also are very costly. And the storage of insulin, before use, storage in 2 to 8 degrees C, avoid freezing. Vials which are in use, you store out of fridge to maximum, and do not store any excessive heat or sunlight. Use within 4 to 6 weeks once open. To sum up, the role of insulin. Insulin plays a vital role in blood glucose regulation. Without insulin, series of physiological processes are disrupted, eventually to hyperglycemia. Used by all patients with type 1 and patients with type 2 diabetes after failure of OAD. It can be short-acting, intermediate and long-acting, and human insulin were launched in 1980s. Modern analog insulin have been available from 1980. And it is the duty of every physician to spend some time with patient before starting insulin. I used to remember Professor Sundaram used to tell your patients in his language, if you take one more idli, then you can increase one more dose of 1 drop of insulin. If you take 2 idli, 2 drop more. But if you take 3 idlis, not 3 drops, it may go to up to 6 drops. That you have to make him to understand. And once there was a abroad tour, when insulin was, symposium was going, people were projecting this human insulin vial. There you can see the animal picture. Professor Sundaram was asking, you say it is a human insulin, why you have put the animal in the insulin? So these are all some interesting milestone we came across during our profession. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you, sir. You are wonderfully covered the necessary information about the insulin. We can talk about hours But anyway, the necessary information has been provided. Carry home message is never ever deny or delay the insulin benefits if warranted. So, taking conscious efforts to minimize the hypoglycemia and weight gain. Now we go for a next topic, the GIP, the forgotten hormone. Of course, the GLP-1 analog is taking prime role in incretins. We almost forgotten the GIP hormone role in the food intake and in response to food intake. Now, after this dual G agonist and triple G agonist, it rekindled the interest of about the GIP hormone. So, to talk about GIP hormone, we have Dr. Balaji. He is a treasurer, RSG Tamil Nadu chapter. He is faculty in various conferences and he organized the state conferences and in Tamil conferences also in Kumkonam. Dr. Balaji, sir, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the nice introduction. So, respected chairpersons, senior doctors, and my dear friends, at the outset, my sincere thanks to Dr. Anand Mose sir and Dr. Shanmugam and the entire RSST Tamil Nadu chapter for giving this wonderful opportunity to speak on a topic, the GIP, the forgotten hormone. So, let me start with the role of gut in the glucose homeostasis. So, we all know the role of neural transmission and endocrine transmission circulating substance. So, my focus is today on the endocrine transmission, how it acts on the brain, the islets and the adipose tissue. So, what is incretin hormones? The hormones that are released from the gut after the ingestion of the nutrients. So, and the key incretins are the GIP and GLP-1. What are the functions? The main function is to augment the insulin secretion and making the enteroinsular axis critical for the glucose tolerance. So, with this function, way back in 1906, the incretin concept was launched. So, what is this incretin? So, it's the internal secretion of the pancreas might be stimulated and initiated by a substance of a nature of a hormone or a secretin yielded by the duodenal mucous membrane. So, intestinal secretion of insulin, the word was taken from this thing and it is termed as incretin. So, this was the concept of incretin. So, what is the incretin effect? We all know about the incretin effect. So, it's the significantly higher insulin secretion in response to oral glucose when compared to the intravenous glucose, and it is mainly mediated by the GIP and GLP-1. One thing is up to 2/3 of the total insulin response to the oral glucose is due to those incretin hormones. So, in a normal individual, this incretin effect is fully present, but in case of type 2 diabetes, it's completely reduced. The incretin effect is totally reduced. So, where this GIP and GLP-1 are segregated? So, it is the GIP is secreted by the K cells of the small intestine, whereas the GLP-1 are secreted by the L cells of the small intestine. So, what is this GIP? So, glucose dependent insulinotropic polypeptide, which is otherwise known as gastric inhibitory polypeptide. So, this incretin hormone plays a significant role, yet often overlooked role in glucose metabolism and insulin secretion. So, while it was once overshadowed by its counterpart, the GLP-1, GIP has recently gained renewed interest in scientific research for its potential therapeutic applications, especially in the context of metabolic disorders like diabetes and obesity. So, what are the functions in a healthy individual? So, postprandial GIP levels are approximately 4-fold higher compared to the GLP-1 under normal physiological conditions. And this GIP is responsible for the majority of the insulinotropic incretin effect and has additional functions that are distinct from the GLP-1. Unlike the GLP-1, it is both insulinotropic and gluconotropic in glycemic dependent manner, dose dependently stimulating glucagon secretion under hypoglycemic conditions and insulin under the hyperglycemic conditions. So both the GAP receptor and the GLP-1 receptor are present in the beta cells, and the expression of the GAP is distributed differently in the extrapancreatic tissues, and it is abundant in adipose tissue and found in many overlapping areas of the central nervous system. So both the insulinotropic activity in type 2 diabetes, the ability of the GAP to stimulate insulin secretion is significantly diminished, which is called as GAP resistance. Similarly, the GLP-1 action is reduced in type 2 diabetes, but it retains much of its insulinotropic activity, making it a more effective therapeutic target. So this is the difference between GLP and GAP-1. So if you just see the contribution of the gut-derived factors to the postprandial insulin secretion, the majority comes from the GAP, more than 45% contributes. So what is the hypothesis on the impaired insulinotropic effect of GAP? A reduced beta cell mass may be allowed to distinct major differences in insulin secretory response to a strong stimulus. So alternative explanations assume a specific reduction in an expression of the GAP receptors or other components of the GAP post-receptor signal co-reduction in animals and studies. So this has been the hypothesis why the expression of the GAP insulinotropic effect is there. So what about the insulin secretion mechanisms? So both the GLP and GAP, they stimulate the insulin secretion through the G protein coupled receptor signaling that activates the adenyl cyclase. But both the incretins require the elevated glucose levels to exert their insulinotropic effects, reducing the risk of hypoglycemia when used in pharmacological therapies. So nearly 2/3 of the postprandial insulin secretion is mediated by the incretins, and GAP contributes to majority of the effects. So nearly 44% of the postprandial insulin secretion is due to the insulin, GAP. So what about, once again, the difference between GAP and GLP-1 in terms of glucagon secretion? If you just see, the GLP-1 suppresses the glucagon secretion in a glucose dependent manner, which helps prevent the excess hepatic glucose production, whereas the GAP increases the glucagon secretion, particularly at low glucose level, which can lead to a more complex interplay in the glucose regulation. So this is the difference between both the things. So what is known about the things? So GLP-1 is associated with beta cell survival, but GAP also induces the cell survival through the extracellular receptor kinase pathway. So this is the main thing. So these are the various tissue benefits of the GAP-1 receptor agonism and the GAP-1 receptor antagonism. So when you combine both these things, you have both the additional effects of decreased appetite, reduced the body weight, decrease the gastric emptying and lipid formulation and other things. So when you have an overview on the biological GAP and GLP-1 agonists, at the organ and tissue level, GAP has a role beyond the glucose homeostasis. So what about the role of GAP in various aspects? So if you just see, we all know about the impact of GLP-1 on weight reduction. But GAP in animal studies, they have suggested they play a significant role in increasing the fat storage. So they have a consistent weight lowering effect when you have this potential therapeutic potential in terms of obesity. What about the CNS effects? So these GLP and GAP-1 receptors in the hypothalamus and brainstem, they are involved in the regulation of the energy intake. So thereby the meal initiation and termination has been reduced, and thereby having an impact on the body weight. So what about the adipose tissue? So it increases the glucose uptake and stimulates the triglyceride storage in the adipocytes. Similarly, they have a reduced blood supply to the substrate uptake, thereby reducing the triglyceride levels to a lesser extent. So this distribution patterns explain the overlapping but distinct biological actions of both the GLP and GLP-1. So the incretin physiology and pathophysiology, you all know about the various impacts of the things. I'm not going into the things. So moving on to the most important aspect. What are the various things what we can do? We can combine either as a mono thing. We know the mono agonist. What are the things? The various GLP-1 analogs, exenatide and things we have been using for a while. What about the other aspect? If we have a dual agonism, we have the GAP receptor agonism. So this dual agonism is a GAP receptor agonism. One aspect of things that tirzepatide will have a huge impact. When you have a glucagon receptor agonism, it's in the pipeline. The third thing is when you combine all three, it's a triple agonist. So they have a huge things. One is insulinotropic and insulin sensitive properties of the GAP will have an impact. Whereas if you have a dual agonist with glucagon, the thermogenic and lipolytic activities of the glucagon will you have. When you combine all the things, insulinotropic and anaerobic effects of the GLP-1 receptor agonist will be then. So the concept of dual agonist, when you combine both the GAP receptor and GLP-1 receptor activated, thereby having an enhanced hormone activity, increased beta cell mass and improved glucose homeostasis. Why a dual agonism should work? So when you have a type 2 diabetes, when you have a dual agonism, it reduces the hyperglycemia, thereby increasing the GLP-1 receptor activity. So what is the co-agonist? Tirzepatide, a novel dual GAP and GLP-1 receptor co-agonist. They have shown superior efficacy in terms of glycemic control and weight reduction compared to the GLP-1 receptor agonist. So what are the various actions? First, the pancreas. So we all know it has a strong reduction in the HbA1c. What about in the stomach? The postprandial fullness is being reduced. What about in case of the subcutaneous white tissue? So weight loss and CNS systems, various effects has been thrown. And finally, the CV safety. So it has a wonderful CV safety. So overall, this tirzepatide is a novel GAP and GLP-1 receptor agonist which is administered once weekly. So it has huge impact on the reduction of HbA1c, weight, various cardiovascular risk factors is being reduced in the body weight, and also it plays a role in the steatosis. So various clinical trials. What about the evidence? So SURPASS type 2 diabetes program, and mainly the various studies have clearly shown tirzepatide when compared with the GLP-1 receptor agonist and placebo, they have a significant reduction in HbA1c and also weight reduction. So in addition to the things they have shown, they have decreased the triglycerides, ApoB and ApoC in a dose-dependent manner associated with decrease in a large TRP and LDP, suggesting an improvement in the insulin sensitivity and atherogenic lipoprotein. So this is the SURPASS 1 to 5. They compared deglutide, semaglutide and placebo, and they have a significant reduction in the HbA1c and also in the weight. And also tirzepatide had reduced the apnea, hypopnea index, body weight, hepatic burden and also HCRP concentration and systolic blood pressure, and improved the sleep-related patient report as per this clinical trial. So a thing about the future molecules, the retatrutide. As I spoke before, the triple agonism, the GLP, GAP and the glucagon. And they have proved that in adults with obesity, this retatrutide treatment for 48 weeks have resulted in substantial reduction in the body weight. So what about the future research directions? Tirzepatide and other dual agonists represent the future of incretin-based therapies affecting superior control of both blood glucose and body weight. And unanswered questions. These, how do GLP and GAP will interact over the long term, and what are the implications for the cardiovascular and neurological outcomes, and also ongoing research is focused on better understanding of the mechanisms behind this incretin therapy, signaling to the optimized future treatments. So GAP and GLP-1 are the key regulators of glucose homeostasis with broad roles in the metabolic regulation. So the story of incretin-based therapy is still evolving with dual agonist like tirzepatide leading the way forward, more comprehensive metabolic solutions. So thank you all for the patient hearing.
Thanks, Dr. Balaji Chidambaram, for that wonderful lecture on the latest update about GIP. I think triple agonists are going to rule the market if your presentation is coming true. And the floor is open for discussion. We have had 3 important presentations and you can ask questions.
Sir, excellent presentation, sir. I had only one doubt, sir. Always whenever we see this tirzepatide and everything, they always ask about the psychiatric manifestations as a side effects. What is your personal experience or real world data or with trials? Psychiatric manifestations of tirzepatide as a side effect.
At present, we have, yes, sir, please.
This particular molecule is not available.
Not available in India.
No, sir, I'm asking in trials, anything with this.
At present, there is no data about these aspect of things. Once the molecule comes to the thing, we can have in future about these psychiatric involved of things.
Balaji, if I
Yes.
add. Yeah, we are doing currently 2 trials with the retatrutide and we have completed 2 trials with the tirzepatide. There is a scoring system for the psychiatric manifestation, especially the suicidal tendencies. Few of them patients had a depression kind of symptoms which they came out once we started escalating the dose. As of now, it is not a contraindication, it is not adverse events, it is of special interest. But they are in all these trials, both the molecules, triple and dual agonists, we are having the questionnaires where the patient has to fill up in every visit. So it's a valid point, but it is not seen so far. Sir, I had recruited in the SURMOUNT-2 trial about 23 patients with tirzepatide. 1 patient had the depression symptom, only 1 out of 23. 29 patients from India. 23 were from my center in SURMOUNT-2 tirzepatide.
Sir, one more question.
Patients on antipsychotic drugs, they tend to gain weight. They develop glucose intolerance as well as dyslipidemia. So the better drug is drugs acting on the GLP receptor system. So it works effectively, reduces body weight, improves lipid profile as well as glycemic control. Really, my question, not my question, that is you need to add one more GIP with reference to bone mineral metabolism.
Yes.
It has a positive impact. That is one. And of course, legacy of Makkal Tilagam and Nadigar Tilagam continues. So also metformin.
Sir, one question can I ask, sir?
Yes.
Sir, regarding this type 1 diabetes, I have many patients who are on this CGM monitoring and bionic insulin. Whenever they come back to me, I have limitations in explaining them in like this. In your real world experience and in your experience, what suggestions you give for this bionic insulin patients who have done insulin pump, type 1 diabetes, because they are using nowadays and they are coming back to us. So what suggestions we can give to them, sir? Bionic pumps, insulin pumps, sir.
Infusion. So they must be always within the reach of the persons who install the pump. That is very, very important. And most of the time, however you teach, they fail to correct.
Yes,
That
sir.
is very
Yes,
important.
Sir. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Selvaraj, one more insulin is in the pipeline. Insulin Icotec. I don't know, it will be introduced in soon by Novo Nordisk. I don't know whether anybody has experience with this once a week insulin.
Of course, Dr. Srinivasa Murthy, he has participated in the clinical trial. He has also published an article in New England Journal of Medicine.
Icodec insulin.
Yes, sir. We did the trial called Quint, and it was once weekly insulin versus the Glargine. It was vis-a-vis the basal bolus with Glargine and bolus plus Icodec. The titrations, and in fact I faced a US FDA inspection for that molecule last September, exactly 1 year back. And the hypoglycemias, especially the night time, because the CGM was used in 6 months 4 times, each time for 15 days. which was blinded to both the patient and the doctor with CGM. So the hypoglycemia unawareness or the nighttime hypoglycemias were on par with the glargine, and the dosage required, total dosage required, was lesser with the Icodec. So the cost probably, which will be more for Icodec versus glargine, that will probably negate. That is what is our inference, because cost is again a factor. But the efficacy wise, safety wise, it is on par with the glargine.
So one more question regarding the Icodec. One more question to you and Srinivasa Murthy. When you give basal insulin glargine, actually it is not truly 24 hours, 22 hours or 23 hours. Sometimes patient develops nocturnal hypoglycemia with glargine. So when the patient develops nocturnal hypoglycemia or some hypoglycemia, next day we adjust the dose and reduce the dose, everything. When you give Icodec, 7 days, 24 hours into 7, the patient develops hypoglycemia on the 3rd day or 4th day. Already we have given the dose. How will you reduce the dose or how will you adjust?
Sir, still the mechanism is not known, but the correction of hypoglycemia is equal to glargine. That means it immediately gets corrected, and there is no that recurrent hypoglycemia is not seen. That is what we were also fearing, because the half-life is 9 days. It's not 7 days, so that's why they pitched it for every 7 days. But the hypoglycemia, what we saw in clinical trials, not very serious hypoglycemias, but there was no withdrawals also. Correction is equivalent to glargine. The mechanism still we are not able to explain how it gets corrected and why the next day or the other next day will not come.
Yeah, we can correct it, but the problem is a recurrent hypoglycemia patient develops, that is a problem.
Actually not been reported with reference to Icodec. We have gone through many articles relevant to the Icodec. In all the trials, no, there is no.
Even with the other available insulin, degludec and glargine, we have been told that no hypoglycemia. But some of the patients, they develop hypoglycemia even with the degludec, even with the glargine. So that is 24 hours action, we can easily correct it. We are not in fear of recurrent hypoglycemia. But when we give Icodec, it is a wonderful molecule, I don't deny it. When we go through the literatures, it seems to be good. But the only one fear is, 2nd day, 3rd day or 4th day when he develops, we correct it. Suppose he develops a recurrent hypoglycemia, what is a take-home message?
So that's what I said. The correction is like your glargine only. It doesn't, like as you rightly said, 3rd day. What happens on the 5th day? 4th day you correct, 5th, 6th, 7th day. It does not recur. That is what we have seen, and that is why the CGM data, which after the closeout of the study came out, and it also showed the same. The CGM which was blinded. That is why they blinded to the investigator also. During the course of the study, 6 months, 4 episodes of CGM was there. And post the closeout of the study, they released the CGM data. And I was very keen to look at that, people who had hypoglycemias. Because each patient had because hypoglycemia was set as 70. So in that CGM, each patient had about 30-40 in 6 months, which was 69, 68 like that. And they were not corrected. But people who got corrected also, when we checked post closeout, that the hypoglycemia reversed within about 24 hours.
Sir. First week there is hardly any hypoglycemia. That itself is a safer issue. Is it right with the Icodec? The first week, the first injection is quite safe, and so that it will also tells us how much dose is required.
The first dosage, sir, it is, for example, somebody is taking 10 units of glargine. We are supposed to multiply into 7, that is 70, plus add 50% as a loading. So 70 plus 35. So his dosage would be 105, so round it off to 110. That was a dosing titration. So 110 units, we were worried in the first week or the end of first week they will have hypoglycemias. So the CGM starts from there. So luckily, they do not have that. And the loading does now, even in the prescription, it will continue. So 1.5 times we load on the first dose. And even I did with Lilly also, the FC-Tora, which is once weekly insulin, another study, which there also passed, now it is approved. There also it is same thing. 1.5 dose loading dose was given, but there is no hypos in that first or second week.
Murali, all these patients, they are taking oral hypoglycemic drugs also. So you reduce the oral hypoglycemic. Simple.
No, that is later on, sir. Yeah. Later on.
Sir.
Yeah. From second week onwards, it is only that 10 into 7.
Only one more question. Final question.
second, third day we have seen in the CGM. 2 glucometers were given, but the second, third day in the CGM data, that is what was very heartening to see after the closeout, of course, but that data is very, very promising. After the second, third day, it starts acting. No. It is day 1, switch over.
Sir, I got a question, sir.
Final question.
Sir, regarding metformin, in a non-diabetic elderly patient, can you give this molecule as a prophylactic for neurodegenerative diseases, like, let us say, Parkinsonism or dementia? No, as
not
a
indicated,
prophylactic.
sir. Not in the guidelines, sir. No.
Not
it.
Not indicated. Not
indicated.
Not given in any
guidelines.
Off-label.
So
you
even
can
though
give.
it's been claimed it gives neuroprotection, it prevents aging and all, studies are going on, but they have not been. It's not come to the guidelines yet. It's not been prescribed for weight loss. It's been tried for fatty liver because of liver protection, but still it holds only second or third place only.
Off-label you can use, sir. That's it.
Okay. Sir,
I think we are running out, madam. We can discuss.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, they can. You can give. It's been approved.
Okay.
Yes. Sure. Yes, even earlier. If the patient is continuing for PCOS, you can continue even if she gets pregnant, you can continue metformin. Even if she gets pregnant, you can continue the same dosage.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, regarding oral insulin and inhaled insulin, sir, anything we ought to say for it? No, it is. This is a pipeline. It is available in abroad.